Hello. Today I want to talk about the common denominators among notorious criminals. Lori Vallow, Scott Peterson, warrenjeffs, and Jeffrey Epstein. They're all notorious for crimes that they have committed. This past week, I was working on a case, doing a deep dive regarding a lady who escaped a lifetime of sex trafficking. As I was doing my research, it hit me over the head like a ton of bricks that the traffickers' criminal activity reminded me of other cases. I realized that these criminals all did a lot of the same type of things, and their personality traits are very similar. Even though the actual crimes might be different, the parallels are shocking. So here's my question I want to find an answer to. What does a cult leader, a cheating husband, a cheating wife / cult leader, and sex trafficker have in common? Well, today I'll put the similarities side by side and dissect the common factors that seem to be the most prevalent and that contributed to their true evil behavior. On a side note, I do want to acknowledge that in the Jeffrey Epstein case, he was not actually convicted of the crimes he's accused of committing because he killed himself in jail while he was awaiting trial. But just for the sake of argument, I'm adding him into this discussion because all of the evidence against him shows he fit the same criminal mindset as the other three that I'm highlighting today. As I was researching, there were certain common denominators, and I realized that the criminal mind and actions are actually very predictable once you know what you're looking for. I'm talking about both personality traits and strategies that criminals often take, and they share in the same type of criminal mindset. It's like they all trained at the same exact criminal playbook. So let's talk about some of the most common traits. First, I'm going to say a huge word, Machiavellianism. I had to ask my husband how to pronounce it. I know it's a huge word, but it fits all four of them so perfectly that I just had to use it. So you might be wondering, what does Machiavellianism even mean? Okay, listen up to this. It is the tendency to manipulate and deceive others for personal gain. Sound like anybody familiar? All four of these fit it to a T. Okay, let's start off with Lori Vallow. As I've been following her trial in her case from the beginning, there's one thing that I noticed. I didn't even know what the word meant, but I recognized these traits, that she has Machiavellianism. It seemed like everything she did all the time was to manipulate and deceive others for her personal gain. Now remember, she is the one who recently got convicted of killing her 2 children and then also conspired to kill her 5th husband's wife. She was in the way. There were so many examples of Machiavellianism during her trial. So I'm going to talk about just one simple little thing that I've been virtually aware of since I first started following this case. And that is her voice. According to her 4th husband, Charles, who she will soon go on trial for murdering, she screamed and berated him. And yet, when she's on camera after his death, she's happy, flirty, and in my opinion, manipulative. Does this look like the face of somebody who just witnessed their husband getting shot and killed?
How long have you lived here?
Like 3 weeks.
Oh, geez. Yeah, okay.
That's why the neighbors don't know us.
Gotcha.
Like, hi neighbor, sorry.
I think of her first court appearance where she had to answer a question from the judge. She most of the time let her attorneys answer for her, but she acted so timid and mouse-like. Her voice was so quiet you could hardly hear her.
With this arraignment over Zoom today?
No.
Some sources I have found claim she's diagnosed as bipolar, but in these circumstances, it seems to me like she's just playing her role and she's trying to get away with it. Okay, the second one, we'll come back to her. The second one is Scott Peterson. Now, he was convicted of murdering his wife, Lacey Peterson, and their unborn son back in 2004. But his case has come to light in recent years, so I decided to include him into my commentary. A California judge denied Scott Peterson's request for a new trial in the murder of his wife, Lacey Peterson. His conviction was overturned in 2020. That kind of freaked us all out. But he was resentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole in 2021. Peterson's lawyers argued that he should be granted a new trial because one of the jurors in the original trial lied about her history of abuse. They also argued that new evidence, such as DNA found on Lacey's body, cast doubt on Peterson's guilt. Luckily, the judge ruled that Peterson's lawyers had not presented enough new evidence to warrant a new trial. So she found that the jurors' lie did not affect the outcome of the trial. Peterson has always maintained his innocence, but his behavior during the investigation and the trial raised suspicions. Peterson was often cold and indifferent, and he showed little emotion when his wife's body was found. His murderous rampage it just churns my stomach to even think about it today. These words that describe Machiavellianism definitely describe him, which is cunning, devious, disingenuous, opportunistic, and tactical. He planned everything out. For example, Peterson purchased a boat shortly before Lacey's disappearance. He also researched how to sink a boat. Who purchases a boat and then researches how to sink it unless you have certain plans? I'm just saying. Additionally, Peterson told his friends and family that he was going fishing on the day of Lacey's disappearance, but he actually went out on the boat. I guess he was boat fishing. But the boat had no fishing gear, so on and so forth. We don't even want to talk about the cement weights that he made. I mean, there's just so much. Let's move on. Okay, our third person that I want to talk about today is Warren Jeffs. Okay, Warren Jeffs. He is the leader of the fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, FLDS, which is a polygamous sect and a cult. Jeffs has been convicted of child sexual abuse and is currently serving a life in prison, plus 20 years. Jeff's personality traits are also textbook with his cunning, devious, disingenuous, opportunistic, and tactical behavior. Watch this to give you a little enlightenment about Mr. Warren Jeffs. I'm going to give a real quick background about Warren Jeffs, who was the cult leader of the Zion Society. Back in 2008, it was called in that he was abusing young children, so there was a huge raid. Lots of children and women were taken in because of the allegations of Warren marrying underage children. Now, he went on the run, and while he was on the run, these people from this cult, they just continued on with all the rules and strict guidelines, no toys, no playing. Even the children had to work and give all their money to the quote-unquote church, which actually went to Warren Jeffs as he was gallivanting around. He had rules for everything, even how the women were to wear their hair, among other things, how they dress, what they eat, what they do. And he was a predator. He ended up on America's Most Wanted,
As he was on the run, he hid in plain sight, wearing they would have called Gentile clothing, and he was doing a lot of bad things, as he was claiming to be a prophet. After he was caught and all his shenanigans were exposed, one of his top leading officials gave this interview. Now, you have to realize the majority of the people in his cult still did not know anything because they don't watch TV. They don't follow the news. They just do what he says from jail. And I'm not going to say it on here because it's absolutely disgusting, but even this shirt he bought from a porn shop in Vegas, and it has bad meaning behind it. Let's just say that. So after he was found and all the things that were found with him, this interview was done.
The thing that it exposed was the double standard of his life. That he opposes the word red, yet he's driving a red Escalade. He's in Las Vegas, exposing himself to XXX rated movies in hotels. He's in Reno. He's in Mardi Gras. Well, he's preaching that everyone should be on the verge of being lifted up in Short Creek because God's almost to come and get them. That double standard of what that Escalade represented, when we realize it now, and the tug of war over to what does it actually expose, because to me that's all it is. What was actually in there was a horrific exposure of someone who had taken little children and got them and a society to use religious language to gratify himself in the most sick and perverted ways. And it was nothing full of pornography with religious language on the acts, which allowed the acceptance of it to be committed and carried out.
Once again, talk about using the same playbook. Warren Jeffs reminds me of Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell. And once again, Lori says very little, and when she does talk, that very timid, mouse-like voice comes out.
Where are your children? Tell us where they are. Chad, where are Lori's kids? What happened to Tammy, Chad?
Here they are, trying not to give away any of their shenanigans, and yet here's Chad's micro expression of he can't help himself when he thinks about what happened to his wife, which was, Lori has already been convicted. Chad will be tried next year for the murder of his wife.
Can you tell us what happened to Tammy? Why have you guys been in Hawaii for so long?
And just like Warren, they're still trying to run their cult from afar, and they're doing everything that they tell their followers they are not allowed to do.
Listen, just tell people what's happening. There's people around the country praying for your children, praying for you guys. Why don't you give us answers?
That's great.
Her only comment, that's great.
That's great. That's great that they're praying for you, praying for your kids. What? You have nothing to say?
Great reporting by Nate Eaton from East Idaho News, by the way. He's the one that blew this case wide open, and I was lucky enough to meet him when I went to the trial, and he's as nice as you see on camera. Well, nice to those who aren't criminals. Okay, back to Warren.
It's just so ironic to me that while he was giving his followers strict rules about everything they did, he was traveling the country, visiting parks and strip clubs and Mardi Gras. Let me give you an example of some of the things. I touched on it in the video, but let me just talk about it. He controlled finances. Jeffs required his followers to turn over all their money to possession to him. He then used this money to support himself and his inner circle and build up the FLDS community. There were interviews of some of this community who talked about they didn't have enough money left over for their own food and basic simple needs. And here he is traveling the country with cash to spare. As seen in my little clip, they did wear pioneer type clothes, and this was mandatory. Not only the type of clothes, but even the colors, as said in the video, just dictated everything. It's amazing to me. He controlled their education. He did not allow his followers to attend public school. And originally he was the principal of that school, and there's many interviews now that have come out of the abuse that was taking place while he was principal. before he appointed himself prophet. He controlled their relationships. Jeffs arranged marriages for his followers. He also dictated who they could talk to and who they could not talk to, even requiring them to shun their own children and family members. There's so many stories, it's just unbelievable. He would say, you can no longer be married to him, and so now I'm going to have you be married to, like, he controlled everything. This controlling behavior had a devastating impact on his followers. They're so isolated from the outside world. Even still, there's still some followers after all these years that are doing what he says. He is controlling anyone who are still following him from his prison cell. And you know, there's some cases I'm looking into right now. There's 4 missing children right now as we speak from people who broke away from the religion. Then their children get stolen back, and they are not found as of right now as we speak. This guy thinks he's above the law. I mean, he's so wishy-washy, though sometimes he, like at one point, he even admitted that he was evil and he wasn't a prophet, but then he snaps back into it, goes back into this controlling lifestyle that he does. When he was convicted in 2011, he was convicted of 2 felony counts of child assault. Who does that? He also checks the box for cunning, devious, disingenuous, opportunistic, and tactical behavior. Okay, the 4th person I want to talk about is another Jeff. This one's Jeffrey Epstein. He was a wealthy financier who was arrested for sex trafficking. Epstein was accused of using his wealth and status to groom and abuse underage girls. Epstein had a history of grandiose claims and all about himself, and he was known to be very controlling. Jeffrey Epstein developed an elite social circle and procured many women and children whom he and his associates sexually abused. There's been allegations that even a certain prince was caught up in with Jeffrey Epstein. Do you see cunning, devious, disingenuous, opportunistic, and tactical behaviors with this guy? Okay, let's go on to the second trait that all these criminals seem to possess, and that is narcissism. When you read the definition of narcissism, their pictures could be what is put in the dictionary next to it to show you what it is. So let's talk about what narcissism is. But really, as I'm describing what narcissism is, I want you to be thinking about those 4 criminals and see if you see any common traits from them. Okay, narcissism is a personality disorder characterized by grandiose self-importance and a need for excessive admiration and lack of empathy for others. People with narcissistic personality disorder, which is called NPD, believe they're superior to others and they deserve special treatment. They often boast about their accomplishments, talents, and possessions. They may also belittle or ignore the accomplishments of others. People with NPD often have a strong need for admiration and validation. They may constantly seek out praise and attention from others. They may also feel entitled to special treatment and privileges. They become angry or defensive if they do not receive the attention or admiration they believe they deserve. People with NPD often have difficulty empathizing with others. They may not be able to understand or care about the feelings of others. They may also be very self-centered and focused on their own needs. Narcissistic people use manipulation and control to get what they want. They feel envious of others who they perceive as being more successful or talented. And boy, do they ever act arrogant and boastful. Check out this video.
Thank you very much. Hello there. How you doing, Lori?
I'm good.
Lori
How are you?
Vallow from Austin, Texas.
That's right.
Hairstylist in Austin, hey?
That's right. The best.
How's the hair in Austin?
It's good.
Good.
Austin's a happening place.
Probably thanks to you.
Pretty much.
Talk about your family a little bit.
I have a wonderful husband, Joseph, at home, who is watching our two beautiful children, Colby, who's 7, and Tylee, who is 1.
Yeah, what do you guys like to do for fun?
We like to play all kinds of sports on our 3 acres.
Okay, it sounds like you have a nice life there.
We do.
Congratulations.
Thank
Nice to
you.
have you with us.
One thing that I noticed about Lori, here she is totally bragging about Joseph and how wonderful he is, blah, blah, blah. And yet later on, she's in a podcast talking about how horrible her husband, Joseph, was and that she wanted to murder him, which this is her third husband who also died of mysterious circumstances. But it's another example of how someone has to be so extreme. Everything they say is either, oh, my life is just so wonderful, or, oh, my life is absolutely the pits. Like they're just so extreme.
So here's my question. Do narcissistic traits tie into criminal activities? And that grandiose self-importance. And I just wonder if it helps to lead them down the path that they are above the law. And even the point of believing they can get away with murder. I know not all narcissists are criminals, but I wonder if, for the most part, criminals are usually always narcissistic. I don't know. But in the case of these 4, it seems to be. In Lori and Scott's cases, they seem to take it to the very extreme. Whereas the Jeffs, as I'm going to call them, Warren and Epstein, they took their behavior to the very extreme too, but theirs was with molesting children. It's important to acknowledge that narcissism is not a mental illness that causes people to commit crimes. But narcissistic traits can make it more likely that someone will commit a crime, especially if they are also experiencing other mental health problems, such as psychopathy or borderline personality disorder. Okay, speaking of psychopathy, it's a trait that seems to be prevalent in a lot of criminal minds. I mean, I'm no doctor, but the patterns of these 4 criminals do seem to fall in line with the definition of psychopathy. Okay, let's talk about what it is and visualize the 4 monsters' personalities and see if we see any common denominators for psychopathy. Psychopathy is also a personality disorder characterized by a lack of empathy, remorse, and conscience. People with psychopathy often have grandiose sense of self-importance, just like narcissists, but they need power and control. They have a tendency to manipulate and to exploit others. They also tend to be impulsive and reckless, which ties in with when they are engaging in criminal or violent behavior. There are several similarities between the monstrous 4 behavior and the characteristics of psychopathy. Let me give you some examples. They all show the lack of empathy for others. 3 of them don't even care about their own children. One of which, Epstein, never had children, but my guess is he wouldn't have cared if he did. They've all been described as being manipulative and controlling and having a history of making false and misleading statements. It's important to remember that psychopathy is a complex disorder. I'm not trying to diagnose anyone, but I'm just trying to bring up the idea that it could be a possibility. Psychopaths are often very good at manipulating others, as I said, and they're often seen as being untreatable. Okay, let's face it. The Jeffs, Scott and Lori, all seem to share these traits, often using the same playbook to commit their crimes. I've noticed that their playbook typically involves 5 things. So here's the criminal playbook for these monsters. Number 1, the first thing they do in their playbook is they identify a target. The 4 monsters targeted people who they believed were vulnerable, gullible, and who they could easily control. Number 2, developing a plan. Each of the four monsters developed a detailed plan for how they would commit their crimes. The plan included everything from choosing the right time and the right place. Number 3, carrying out the crime. Once they developed the plan, they stopped at nothing to bring it to fruition, which involved using violence, deception, or intimidation. Number 4, low self-control. They all had difficulty controlling their impulses and emotions. And then 5, risk-taking. The four monsters were often willing to take risks, even to the highest level. It's just crazy the risks they took. Yet they thought they were above it. They showed no remorse for their crimes and told many lies. These are human beings who made choices that caused great harm to others. In addition to showing no remorse and telling many lies, the four monsters also share some more other common traits. They're all charismatic and manipulative individuals who are able to easily gain the trust of others. When I look at them individually, I see how they're able to pull people in. I did a whole video about Lori, how she could pull me in, and I never thought I was susceptible to that. I remember watching the videos as the whole Scott Peterson thing was going on. I was pulled in for him. I believed him. I mean, now that we know what we know, it's easy to see like, oh, why didn't I see that, you know? But he pulled me in. And then
I'm curious, did any of you follow the Scott Peterson case? And if you did, were you believing him initially, or am I on my own on this? Comment below, let me know.
Jeffrey Epstein, I didn't have enough, I didn't have any interaction. I didn't watch videos about him, but I will say he certainly seemed to pull in the elite around the world. He had it in. And as far as warrenjeffs, I can't even imagine how he pulled anybody in, but you have to realize he was the son of a previous cult member who already had the cult intact. So when he appointed himself prophet, the people were already brainwashed, so he just had to continue on and then create even more sinister plots than his father even did. But I will say this about those four. Charismatic, yeah, I said that. But they also were very intelligent. They had to be in order to make this all happen. And they were resourceful, which allows them to get away with their crimes for long periods of time. I just can't even imagine how I got sucked in. Again, like for instance, for Scott Peterson, until his girlfriend comes out and everything started to unravel. And then all of a sudden I realized, whoa, the whole country, we fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. All four of these criminals were very good at reading people and understanding their weaknesses. They use this knowledge to their own advantage, often playing their victims' emotions to get what they want. As I was thinking about these four, I know there's many more that fit into this same kind of playbook. And I'm curious, can you think of any criminals that also use this same criminal playbook that I talk about? I think there's a lot of them out there. Comment below and give me your ideas of criminals who seem to be playing from the same criminal playbook as these four monsters. And thank you so much for stopping by my channel, A Life Without Parole, and I will see you again soon. See ya.